To Europe by Sea. Africa's Youth and the Deadliest Route Across the Mediterranean. By Oluwaseun Alexander Dada.
Prologue. The names we never knew. The boat was never meant to hold that many people. It was a rubber dinghy, cracked, patched, and leaking at the seams. 82 souls packed shoulder to shoulder, thigh to thigh, with nothing but salt water and sky stretching for miles. No life jackets. No coordinates. No certainty. Only a whisper passed from one trembling mouth to the next: Europe is close. Just hold on. They had left at midnight, launched from a desolate beach outside Zawara, Libya, where smugglers operate under the cover of stars and rifles. Many had already survived the Sahara. Some had escaped makeshift prisons where food came once a day, if at all. Others had been sold in broad daylight at roadside slave markets. Now they floated on a fragile raft of hope, pushed forward by the promise of a continent that, at least in their dreams, would not treat them like ghosts. By morning, the sea turned. The waves rose without warning. The engine sputtered. The bodies shifted too much, too fast. And then, silence. The kind of silence that only comes after screaming has given up. When the rescue ship arrived, it was too late for most. 74 were dead. Drowned. Gone. Among the survivors were a boy from Guinea who had never seen the ocean before that night, and a young woman from Senegal, 5 months pregnant, who clutched a soaked backpack as if it contained her entire life. The news reports were brief. Another migrant boat capsizes in the Mediterranean. 70 feared dead. Rescued taken to Sicily for processing. No names. No photos. Just numbers. Faceless. Weightless. But they had names. The boy from Guinea was named Fode. He used to play football barefoot in the red dirt outside Conakry. His mother sold plantains in the market and saved for 2 years to help him escape conscription into a rebel faction. The woman from Senegal was Aminata. She had taught French to children in her village before the school closed due to government cuts. Her baby would have been named Mariam, after her grandmother. She never got the chance. We rarely hear these names. Instead, we are given numbers. We are shown blurry photos of half-deflated boats, read statistics about migration flows, and scroll past headlines with words like influx, crisis, and illegals. We are taught to see the sea as a border and forget that it's a grave. But this book is not about numbers. It is about names. Faces. Dreams. Grief. It is about those who left because staying felt like dying slower. It is about those who believed in something better and met the ocean instead. Every year, thousands of young Africans leave their homes, not because they hate where they come from, but because hope has become too expensive to afford. They cross deserts where the sand remembers bodies no map records. They endure beatings in Libyan warehouses, risk drowning in waters that hold more bones than boys, and arrive, if they survive, into a world that greets them not with sanctuary, but suspicion. And yet, still, they go. This book tells the story of that going. Of the forces that push them, the fantasies that pull them, and the cruel machinery that profits from their desperation. It is a story that begins in places with names we often ignore: Kolda, Banjul, Kano, Agadez, and ends in morgues labeled unknown male, approx age 22. But let us not begin with tragedy alone. Let us begin with remembrance. Because buried beneath every statistic is a story, and behind every border is a name someone still whispers in prayer. They were not just migrants. They were brothers, daughters, lovers, and students. They danced to Afrobeats. They recited Quranic verses. They had jokes. And fears. And playlists. And plans. They were loved. They were human. And they deserved to be remembered. This is for them. Part 1. The Quiet Desperation. Before the sea, before the desert, before the boats, there is a moment. A moment when a young man in the Gambia stares at a cracked ceiling and wonders if he'll ever be more than a burden. When a girl in Senegal hears her teacher hasn't been paid in 6 months and knows her future is slipping out of reach. When a boy in Nigeria scrolls past job listings that demand 10 years of experience he doesn't have, and wonders if the recruiters are laughing behind the screen. This is where the journey begins, not with movement, but with a slow erosion of faith. In government. In opportunity. In staying. It doesn't start in Libya. It starts in homes where fathers once dreamed, but now sit quietly through dinner. In schools with no books. In towns where the only working business is the bus station out. Here, the exodus is not sudden. It is quiet. A cousin leaves. A neighbor disappears. A friend posts a snow-filled photo from Europe. And then one day, you begin to wonder if staying is just another way of giving up. This part of the story is not about maps or migration policies. It is about what happens in the soul when home no longer feels like a future. This is the desperation that whispers, anywhere is better than here. This is where escape begins. Chapter 1. I had to leave to live. In a small town on the outskirts of Banjul, the Gambia, Lamin used to wake up to the sound of goats bleating and his father tuning a battered transistor radio to BBC World Service. He had once dreamed of becoming a journalist himself, someone who could tell his country's stories to the world. But by 22, that dream was already fading. The school where he studied mass communication had no functioning library. For months, lecturers had been on strike over unpaid salaries. Internet service was patchy, and the government had censored several online platforms in the name of national security. Lamin had applied for internships at 4 local media houses. None responded. Eventually, he began working at his uncle's carpentry shop, earning just enough to buy bread and mobile data. "It's not that I hated my country," he said quietly. "It's that it hated me back." Across West Africa, Lamin's story is not unique. From the urban sprawl of Lagos to the fishing villages of Casamance in southern Senegal, a quiet desperation has settled over an entire generation. It is not the desperation of famine or civil war, but of slow suffocation, stagnant economies, dysfunctional education systems, and leaders who age but never leave. This is the kind of despair that makes young people risk everything to flee, not because they want to die, but because they want to live differently. The weight of a broken system. In Dakar, 19-year-old Aissatou dropped out of school when her mother lost her job as a cleaner at a hotel shuttered by the pandemic. She started selling mangoes by the roadside, saving every franc CFA she could. Her plan was not to go to university. It was to reach Spain. "Even if I clean toilets in Europe," she said, "at least I can help my family." In Nigeria, nearly 54% of young people are unemployed or underemployed. For every graduate who lands a job, 10 more remain stuck in a cycle of unpaid internships, endless job applications, and whispered conversations about leaving. The educated are no longer motivated by ambition alone, they're driven by a need to escape the indignity of wasted potential. Adebayo, a civil engineering graduate from Ibadan, now spends his days pushing a wheelbarrow at a construction site. "My lecturers used to say we were the future," he laughed bitterly. But the future doesn't eat. In Guinea, Mariam was the first girl in her village to finish high school. Her father slaughtered a goat to celebrate her university admission. But a year later, she dropped out. There was no money left. Her younger siblings had to eat. Now she sells second-hand clothes at the market. "I still believe in school," she said. But belief doesn't pay fees. When education doesn't deliver. In countries like Sierra Leone, Guinea, and the Gambia, public education has become a hollow ritual. Classrooms are overcrowded, syllabuses outdated, and teachers unpaid. Even when students manage to graduate, their degrees carry little weight outside their own borders. "I studied hard," said Fatou, who earned top grades at her secondary school in Bracama. "But when I asked my cousin in Italy to help me get a job, he said my certificate wouldn't be recognized. It was like my effort meant nothing." The disillusionment runs deep. In Ghana, students stage protests not just over tuition fees, but over broken promises, scholarships that never arrive, labs with no equipment, and libraries filled with torn books. Kwame, a third-year biology student in Kumasi, recalled studying parasitology using a single shared textbook from 1998. "We were memorizing diseases we couldn't diagnose, with equipment we didn't have, for jobs that didn't exist." The peer pressure to leave. Once, the pressure was to succeed at home. Now, it's to succeed abroad. On WhatsApp and Facebook, young Africans see photos of old classmates posing beside European landmarks or sending remittances home. These images, often carefully curated, fuel a belief that life abroad is not just better, but necessary. In the small town of Ziguinchor, Senegal, 18-year-old Mamadou explained, "If you stay, people think you have failed. My brother crossed to Italy last year. He sends money. People respect him. Me? I just fix motorbikes." Migration is no longer a secret plan, it's an open strategy. Friends share YouTube videos titled "How to Cross to Europe Safely" or tips on which smugglers to trust. The line between bravery and desperation blurs. In WhatsApp groups with names like The Journey or Europe Bound, misinformation and real-life advice flow side by side. Voice notes warn about bad smugglers. Photos show fake documents. Google Maps links to desert checkpoints are exchanged like recipes. Faith and fatalism. Many who leave entrust their journey to God. Mosques and churches are filled with prayers for visas, safe passage, and reunion with family abroad. Pastors anoint passports. Imams bless travel plans. "God will protect me," said Suleiman, a 20-year-old from Kano preparing to journey through Niger. "My mother cried when I told her. But she also gave me her blessing." What choice do we have? Religious belief merges with a kind of fatalistic hope. If they die, it was meant to be. If they live, maybe they will find something worth the cost. Some migrants carry small Bibles or Korans in plastic wraps against their chests. Others take amulets blessed by traditional healers. Faith becomes luggage, both spiritual and practical. Not just a youth problem. It is easy to frame this crisis as a youth issue, but the roots go deeper. Parents encourage their children to leave. Communities celebrate those who make it. Local economies rely on remittances from Europe. In some towns, the main income is not agriculture or trade, it is money sent back from Paris, Barcelona, or Berlin. Even governments benefit. Remittances boost national GDPs. Diaspora communities are courted during election seasons, paraded as proof of global success. But little is done to create reasons for young people to stay. In Bissau, the capital of Guinea-Bissau, a local radio station ran a poll asking listeners if they would advise their children to emigrate if given the chance. Over 90% said yes. The question wasn't controversial. The answer was common sense. They told me I was wasting my life. When Lamin finally told his father he planned to leave, the old man didn't protest. He simply sighed and handed him a crumpled $500 note. "I hope Europe is kinder to you than this place," he said. Lamin's journey began with a smuggler's contact passed down from a friend of a cousin. It took him through Senegal, Mali, and into the sands of Agadez. He paid bribes at checkpoints, slept in abandoned houses, drank from plastic bags. Each night, he prayed for strength. Each morning, he woke up surprised to still be alive. He made it to Libya. The rest, like for so many others, was left to the sea. Some of his friends didn't make it that far. One was arrested in Bamako. Another went missing in the desert. Lamin never learned if he had survived. What does it take to stay? For every person who leaves, 10 more wish they could. But staying is not always a virtue, it is often a verdict. Those who remain behind carry the weight of deferred dreams. They endure blackout nights, broken promises, and bureaucratic brick walls. Some fight back. Youth-led startups in Accra. Civic education workshops in Banjul. Grassroots farming cooperatives in Bamako. There are sparks of resistance. But the road is long, and the support scarce. In Serekunda, a group of university graduates started a coding club for teens. In Kotona, a collective of artists launched a gallery featuring work about migration. In Niamey, young women built a literacy program for out-of-school girls. These efforts are real. But they are not yet enough. To choose to stay in countries that seem to reject your potential is an act of radical faith. But even faith needs fuel. Infrastructure. Investment. Vision. Leadership. Leaving isn't betrayal. It's a symptom. The West often sees African migration through the lens of illegality or pity. But what if we saw it instead as testimony? A generation testifying against broken systems. Testifying with their feet. Their bodies. Their absence. They are not running from their roots. They are running from the rot. And in doing so, they are asking a question we all must answer. What kind of continent drives its brightest minds into the desert, into the sea, just to taste the hope of a better life? This is not just a migration crisis. It is a dignity crisis. It is a future in free fall. It is the quiet desperation of youth who would rather die moving than live stuck. And so they leave. Not because they hate home, but because home stopped loving them back. This chapter is not just a portrait of despair. It is a record of courage. Of young people who refuse to be buried by bureaucracy, who refuse to sit still in systems built to waste them, who choose motion, dangerous, uncertain, painful motion over silence. They may not all survive, but they are already speaking. Through their journeys, through their choices, through their absence. And we must listen. Chapter 2: The Village That Emptied Itself. There is a village in central Senegal where the silence is thick. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy kind, the silence of absence. It used to be filled with laughter, music from battery-powered radios, and the sound of footballs being kicked across dusty fields. Now, the quiet stretches from one compound to the next. Most of the young men are gone. They did not leave all at once. It started with a boy named Cheek who vanished one night without telling anyone but his cousin. 2 months later, he called from Naples. He was alive. He had made it. That single call became the spark. Soon after, Samba followed. Then Usman. Then Fallou. One by one, they slipped away, at first secretly, then openly, even proudly. By the end of the year, nearly every family in the village had someone who had left or was preparing to leave. The rhythm of departure became the new norm. It wasn't just a trend, it was a tide. This is the story of what happens when an entire village begins to disappear, not through war or disease, but through hope. He left with my blessing. Aissatou, a widow in her early 60s, stands at the doorway of her home, shaded by a neem tree. Her eldest son, Amadou, left for Europe 5 years ago. He was the first in their extended family. He didn't want to, she says. But he couldn't stay. He finished school and found nothing. No job. No prospects. Just heat and hunger. She sold her only gold bangle to pay for his journey. A gift from her own mother, passed down through generations. I cried when I gave it to him, she says. But what use is gold when your child is starving inside? Today, Amadou sends money every month. With his support, Aissatou built a cement wall around her home, replaced the thatched roof with zinc, and paid school fees for her younger children. Her eyes shine when she speaks of him, but her voice trembles too. I'm proud, she says. But I miss him. The house is too quiet. A village of women, children, and the old. By 2025, the gender imbalance in the village was undeniable. During the day, the fields are tended by women, children carry water, and the elderly sit under baobab trees reminiscing about busier times. The mosque still calls the faithful, but prayers are quieter now. The women left behind bear more than the weight of labor, they carry the emotional toll. Kaderi, 28, is raising her 3 nieces and nephews after her brother left for Spain and her sister-in-law died from complications during childbirth. He promised he would come back in 2 years, she says. It's been 6. Migration has changed marriage dynamics too. Some young women delay or avoid marriage altogether, preferring the independence that comes from remittances. Others enter into uncertain unions with men they haven't seen in years, bound more by financial dependence than affection. When the phone rings, every phone call from abroad is a mix of joy and dread. Good news could mean money, a visa offer, or news of a new job. Bad news is harder. A call from Libya that someone has been detained. A message from a stranger announcing that a boat sank. A voice note cut short. One woman, Hawa, received such a call 3 years ago. Her son, Bokar, had left for Italy via Libya. The last message she received was a photo of him smiling in a crowded truck. Then silence. I still keep his clothes, she whispers. I don't know if he's dead. I don't know if he's alive. But a mother never buries hope. Remittances and the economy of absence. Though the physical presence of young men is gone, their money still circulates. Western Union and Orange money agents are now among the busiest businesses in town. Markets that once sold only millet and peanuts now offer imported goods, phones, sneakers, and processed food items. New motorbikes roam the dusty roads, paid for by sons abroad. But money cannot fill silence. It cannot hug a mother, teach a child how to fish, or laugh with an aging grandfather. It sustains life, but it cannot replace it. Social status redefined. In this village, success is no longer measured by what you build at home, but by where you live abroad. A man who sends money from Paris is praised more than one who grows rice locally. A girl who posts selfies in Barcelona receives more likes than one studying nursing in Dakar. This reshaped value system has consequences. Young people begin to associate worth with escape. They no longer ask what they want to do with their lives, they ask how fast they can leave. The empty classroom. The local school, once bustling with students, now struggles to keep pupils engaged. Some children openly admit they don't see the point of education. Why learn algebra when I can go to Europe and make money? Asked Musa, a 15-year-old whose older brother crossed the Mediterranean 2 years ago. Teachers do their best, but morale is low. Fatu, a primary school teacher, says, "We teach, yes. But half the time, we're preparing children for a future they plan to abandon." When the tide reverses. Not everyone succeeds abroad. Some are deported. Others return scarred, mentally, emotionally, even physically. In recent years, a few young men have trickled back to the village, often quietly. They avoid questions. They walk with different eyes. Aliou returned after spending 2 years in detention in Libya. He doesn't talk much about what happened. He spends his days helping his father in the fields, avoiding public gatherings. "I left to become a man," he says. "But I came back feeling less than one." His return is a silent testimony to a brutal truth. Not every journey ends in triumph. Hope in the cracks. Still, some villagers are trying to reverse the tide. A youth cooperative was formed to teach agribusiness and entrepreneurship. A community radio show now runs weekly programs about safe migration and opportunities at home. A women's group started a microlending scheme that helps young girls start tailoring businesses. If they must leave, let it be with skills, says Marioma, the leader of the women's group. But if they stay, let it be because there's something to stay for. Conclusion: the future that stayed behind. The village that emptied itself still breathes. It still sows and reaps. Children still laugh, though more softly. The old still sing, though their songs carry more longing. Migration has become both blessing and burden, a lifeline and a loss. It has reshaped this village in profound ways, stretching its heart across continents. What remains now is a fragile hope, that one day, leaving won't be the only way to live. Until then, the village waits. For calls. For news. For return. For the sound of footsteps on its dusty road once again. Part 2, The Smuggler's Route. To leave was already a risk. But to move forward meant gambling everything. The decision to leave home is only the first step. What follows is a gauntlet of danger, desperation, and deception that snakes through the Sahel and into the hands of smugglers who trade in dreams. From the scorched sands of Agadez to the lawless corridors of Libya, this is the shadow world where hope is monetised and humanity is optional. Here, migration becomes a business, and young people become commodities. They are loaded into pickup trucks like freight, shaken down at checkpoints, and often vanish into the desert without a trace. Those who survive the Sahara find themselves detained, extorted, or enslaved in Libya, trapped in a limbo where the only way out is through the sea. This part of the journey exposes the brutal machinery that profits off Africa's exodus. It is a route lined not only with bones, but with betrayal, and yet, still, they go. Chapter 3, Sahara, Africa's Unmarked Grave. The sand doesn't care who you are. It buries without bias. Ibrahim, survivor of the Agadez route. 1. The desert is not empty. When people speak of migration, they often jump straight to the sea. But before the waves, before the rubber boats, comes something even more unforgiving, the Sahara. It stretches for thousands of miles, swallowing entire vehicles, dehydrating dreams, and burning away the certainty of survival. For many migrants, the desert is their first real confrontation with death. The silence here isn't peaceful, it's predatory. It listens. It waits. Agadez, a city in central Niger, has become the desert's most notorious gateway. Once a hub of Tuareg traders and salt caravans, today it is the unofficial capital of smuggling routes in West Africa. Everyone knows someone who has passed through. Everyone has heard stories of who didn't make it out. Ibrahim was just 19 when he arrived in Agadez from Kano, Nigeria. The bus dropped us at night. The smuggler told us not to speak to anyone. We were taken to a compound with metal gates and plastic mattresses. The next morning, we left. 15 of us in the back of a Toyota Hilux. He paused. That was the last time I saw 6 of them. 2. A marketplace of movement. In Agadez, movement is a currency. Smugglers, known as passeurs, operate in broad daylight. They negotiate rates by nationality. Nigerians often pay more. Gambians are sometimes discounted, as if hope could be bought in bulk. One survivor, Saliu from Guinea, described the system like a transportation cartel. There are menus. Routes with different prices. Fast but dangerous is cheaper. Safe but slow means more stops and more bribes. The irony is bitter. The same governments that failed to provide jobs now fund border patrols to stop young people from leaving. EU-backed surveillance programs have turned Nigerian gendarmes into migration enforcers. But the demand has not stopped, it has simply gone underground. When crackdowns began in 2017, smugglers adapted. Instead of driving openly in convoys, they now move in smaller groups, through deeper desert paths. This has made the journey not safer, but deadlier. Before, said one fixer, we had GPS and satellite phones. Now we use memory and luck. 3. Thirst, theft, and abandonment. The Sahara kills without drama. Not in explosions, not in screams. Just slowly, through thirst, heat, and abandonment. Many trucks carry 20 or more people, along with jerrycans of fuel, sacks of rice, and sometimes goats. There is no shade. No guarantee of water. If the truck breaks down, the smuggler may vanish with promises of a replacement. Days pass. People start drinking radiator water. Then they stop moving. Fatoumata, a 22-year-old from Mali, recalled, "We saw bones. Real bones. Not animal bones, human. A skull with teeth. My friend started crying and wouldn't stop. Sometimes the bodies are buried in shallow graves. Sometimes, there's no time. The sand takes them. A death without documentation. A name erased before it could be recorded. A UN report once stated that for every person who drowns in the Mediterranean, at least 2 die in the desert. But even that number is likely too low. No one counts what no one finds. 4. Checkpoints of extortion. The journey isn't just threatened by nature, it's policed by greed. Along the route through Niger, there are as many as 10 unofficial checkpoints, run by local militias, corrupt police, or criminal gangs. At each stop, bribes are demanded. Those who cannot pay are beaten or taken. Some women are assaulted. Men are made to carry supplies for hours under the sun. Abdoulaye, a carpenter from Côte d'Ivoire, described being stripped and searched for hidden money. They slapped me when they found nothing. Then they took my shoes and said, "Walk barefoot if you're too poor." In one case, a driver left 5 passengers behind after they refused to pay an extra passage tax. No one ever saw them again. Migrants begin their journey thinking the smugglers are the biggest danger. But it's the system around them, the overlapping networks of exploitation, that proves even more lethal. 5. Women in the shadows. For women, the journey through the Sahara carries a second layer of fear. Many prepare for rape the way others prepare for sunburn, expecting it, dreading it, trying to minimize the damage. In multiple testimonies, women reported taking contraceptives before departure. Not because they planned intimacy, but because they assumed it would be forced. Aisha, 18, from Sierra Leone, said she wore baggy clothes to appear older. "I wrapped my chest and didn't speak unless asked. I wanted to disappear." Some smugglers protect women from gangs only to demand sex themselves later. A few women travel with fake husbands, hoping the illusion will shield them. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. And yet, they go. I didn't come this far to turn back, said Aisha. Even if I lose everything, at least I tried. 6. Agadez. Last stop before the unknown. Agadez is not just a transit point, it's a purgatory. Some migrants run out of money and get stuck for months. Others are detained by Nigerian authorities under pressure from European migration deals. IOM, International Organization for Migration, runs voluntary return centers here. But many view them with suspicion. Accepting a return ticket feels like failure. It means calling home to say you didn't make it. It means shame. For those still pushing forward, Agadez is where final preparations are made. Phones are wrapped in plastic. Money is sewn into underwear. Prayers are whispered. Tears are hidden. One smuggler told a group, after this, you belong to the desert. 7. The price of hope. What drives someone to pay hundreds of dollars to risk death? To walk into a desert with strangers and no guarantee of arrival? The answer is deceptively simple, because staying feels worse. In their home countries, these young people are already dying of unemployment, of rejection, of invisibility. The desert, for all its danger, offers the illusion of movement. Of choice. I didn't come here to die, said Suleiman, a mechanic from Burkina Faso. I came here to live. Even if it kills me. The smugglers know this. They exploit the desire for agency. They sell hope by the gallon, by the kilometer, by the border crossed. And business is booming. 8. Survivors and the scarred. Those who survive the Sahara do not emerge unchanged. Their bodies may arrive intact, but something else has shifted. Some lose friends along the way. Others lose pieces of themselves, trust, belief, faith. Many carry trauma silently, unsure who will listen. Who will care? In Saba or Tripoli, they blend into crowds of other survivors. But in their eyes are the stories the world refuses to record, of thirst that cracks the tongue, of dunes that bury screams, of goodbyes never said. And yet, they continue. Because forward is the only direction left. Conclusion: a grave without stones. The Sahara is not a desert. It is a graveyard without tombstones. For every story told, dozens are lost beneath the sand. For every survivor who makes it to the sea, many remain trapped in the heat, the silence, the void. And still they go. Because the journey, brutal as it is, still promises a sliver of something that home does not, a chance. The desert does not judge. It only takes. And for Africa's youth, that's a risk they've already accepted. Chapter 4, Libya, where hope is tortured. In Libya, you do not live. You survive. Or you disappear. Amadou, 24, from the Gambia. 1. Arrival without arrival. For many African migrants, reaching Libya is supposed to be the halfway point, the last station before the sea, the place where the dream of Europe feels closest. But instead of a bridge, Libya becomes a trap. A prison dressed as a promise. Those who survive the Sahara arrive weak, dusty, and dehydrated. They are told, wait here, just a few days. A boat will come. But days turn to weeks, weeks into months, and the waiting is filled with violence, abuse, and despair. Libya is not just a country in crisis. It is a marketplace of human suffering. And migrants are the currency. 2. A state of lawlessness. Since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, Libya has fractured into competing militias, warlords, and criminal networks. There is no unified government, only shifting allegiances and local strongmen. This vacuum of power has made Libya one of the most dangerous places on earth for migrants. In Tripoli, Zawiya, Saba, and Misrata, detention centers run by militias masquerade as government facilities. Others are unofficial, hidden warehouses, garages, or basements where people are held in the dark, beaten, starved, and traded like livestock. One former detainee, Kwame from Ghana, described his time in captivity as being made into a number. They didn't call my name, he said. Just a price. 3. Detention for sale. In Libya, Imprisonment is often a business. Migrants are abducted off the streets, intercepted during sea crossings, or even sold by smugglers they once trusted. Once inside a detention center, their families are contacted and extorted for ransom. "You hear phones ringing all night," said Binta, a young woman from Sierra Leone. "They give you a phone and force you to cry. If your family doesn't pay, they beat you again." The going rate for release ranges from $300 to $1,500. Sometimes the money is paid. Sometimes the person is sold again to another gang, another center, another hell. In some centers, women are separated and subjected to sexual violence. Men are forced into labor, digging trenches, washing cars, cooking for guards. No one is safe. No one is free. 4. Slavery in the 21st century. In 2017, CNN released a video showing African migrants being auctioned off in a dusty Libyan compound, $400 for a strong man, $200 for a woman. The footage shocked the world. But for many migrants, it wasn't news. It was Tuesday. Libya's slave markets are real. They operate in plain sight, often with local complicity. Authorities look the other way or are directly involved. Ibrahim, 27, from Nigeria, was sold twice. "The first man bought me to work on his farm. When I got sick, he sold me to a mechanic who needed help in his garage." He laughs bitterly. "I had a degree in electrical engineering. But there I was, sleeping on a tire under a broken truck." Reports from the UN and human rights groups confirm thousands have endured forced labor, sexual slavery, and torture all within a few hundred kilometers of Europe's shores. 5. Women's war. For women, Libya is a war zone. Many arrive having already endured trauma in the desert. In Libya, that trauma deepens. Rape is common, used as control, punishment, or currency. Fatmata, 20, from Guinea, said she lost count of how many times she was assaulted. "Sometimes the guards would line us up. They'd choose who they wanted for the night. Like it was a restaurant. Some women become pregnant. Some miscarry from beatings. Others give birth in detention cells with no medical care. The children born in captivity rarely survive. And when they do, their mothers are forced to carry not only the baby but the memory. I held her for 5 days," said Mariam, a woman from Mali. "Then she stopped breathing. I wrapped her in my scarf. They wouldn't let me bury her." 6. Complicity beyond borders. Libya's abuse of migrants is not a secret. It is known, documented by international agencies, recorded in leaked videos, testified to by thousands. And yet, it continues. Why? Because the global migration system is built to outsource cruelty. The European Union has funded and trained the Libyan Coast Guard, despite consistent evidence of its collaboration with militias and smugglers. The Coast Guard intercepts migrants at sea not to save them, but to return them to detention. It's a system of containment, keep the suffering far from European borders, no matter the cost. As one EU diplomat said anonymously, "We don't need to see what happens. We just need it to stop happening here." 7. Broken promises, broken bodies. Some migrants are promised safe passage by smugglers only to be betrayed. Others believe once they reach Libya, they'll be placed on boats within days. The truth is more chaotic, more cruel. In Zawara, Sabratha, and other coastal towns, migrants are held in overcrowded houses, waiting for the boat that may never come. Some pay smugglers twice. Others pay with their lives. Adebayo, from Nigeria, was told he'd sail within 48 hours. He waited for 2 months. In that time, he was beaten, starved, and forced to watch others die. "I don't know how I'm still alive," he said. "I think part of me isn't." Those who do make it to the boats often carry scars, both visible and invisible. Libya doesn't just delay the journey. It disfigures it. 8. Acts of resistance. And yet, even in the darkest places, some resist. There are migrants who escape detention through bribes, breakouts, or the help of sympathetic locals. There are underground shelters run by migrants themselves, providing food, first aid, and news. There are even smugglers turned saviors, who switch sides after witnessing too much suffering. A few international NGOs still operate in Libya, risking retaliation to offer assistance. Doctors treat broken bones and burnt skin. Volunteers document abuses and send reports to the UN. In Tripoli, a hidden safe house holds a dozen women and their children. It is guarded by a Libyan woman who lost her son at sea. She said, "I couldn't save him. But I can help someone else's child." These acts are small. But they matter. In a place where hope is tortured, even defiance is a form of survival. 9. Escape or surrender. Eventually, every migrant in Libya must make a choice: attempt the sea crossing or give up and go home. Some opt for voluntary repatriation through IOM programs. But this means calling family to admit defeat. It means returning with nothing but trauma. Others gamble on the Mediterranean. They pay smugglers once more, climb into rubber dinghies under the cover of night, and pray. A third group, perhaps the largest, simply remains. Trapped in an endless cycle of work, abuse, and waiting. Too scared to leave, too broken to fight. One migrant in Misrata put it simply: in Libya, you don't live. You just delay your death. Conclusion: a warehouse of broken dreams. Libya is not just a country along the migration route. It is the crucible where dreams are crushed, where human beings are reduced to profit, and where the world's silence becomes complicity. It is the middle passage of modern migration, less visible than the sea, but just as deadly. In these detention centers and desert compounds, hope is not just deferred, it is beaten, raped, and sold. And yet, somehow, some still carry it. Because even in the places where humanity is most denied, the will to be human survives. And that, too, must be remembered. Part 3. The sea that consumes. They told us the sea was only a few hours. They didn't tell us it could be forever. The sea is meant to be the final barrier. The last test. A blue expanse that holds both salvation and oblivion. But for thousands of migrants, the Mediterranean has become something else entirely: a grave disguised as a passage. After enduring deserts, dodging bullets, and surviving detention, many reach the Libyan coast believing they are close to safety. But what awaits them is not rescue. It is rubber dinghies with failing motors. Overloaded fishing boats steered by terrified teenagers. And waves that do not care who can swim. This part of the journey is not about arrival. It is about survival. And far too often, about disappearance. Here, we confront the sea not as myth, not as metaphor, but as a force that swallows lives, memory, and the world's conscience. Chapter 5. The boatman said we'd arrive by morning. He said it would take just 8 hours. I counted 14 before the engine stopped. Awar, 21, survivor. 1. Nightfall and promises. Most journeys across the Mediterranean begin in darkness. Migrants are told to arrive at a hidden beach near Zawara, Sabratha, or Garibuli after sunset. There, they wait in silence, dozens, sometimes hundreds under the stars, whispering prayers. The smugglers move quickly. Names are not taken. Life jackets are not given. Phones are sealed in plastic, or confiscated. No talking. No lights, they're told. The boat will come soon. You'll be in Italy by morning. But morning rarely brings arrival. It brings water in the boat's floor. It brings waves taller than windows. It brings panic. Awar remembers the man who handed her onto the dinghy. He smiled. Said, "Just be calm. Europe is close." That was the last land I ever saw. 2. The rubber coffins. The boats are often no more than cheap rubber dinghies, purchased wholesale, packed with 100 to 150 people, far beyond their intended limit. They are barely boats at all, no navigation system, no supplies, no one qualified to steer. Sometimes the captain is a migrant himself, handed a compass and told which direction to go. Often he is just a teenager. One such captain, Bashir from Sudan, was only 17 when a smuggler pointed to the horizon and said, "Go that way. Don't stop. Don't turn." He had never touched a boat before. When people screamed, "I just cried," he said. "I wanted to jump in and disappear." The engine is usually second-hand and fragile. If it sputters or stalls, it's hours before help arrives, if it comes at all. Fuel leaks into the boat. Skin burns from salt water and gasoline. Children cry themselves hoarse. Some fall asleep and never wake. 3. SOS. Silence over the radio. In theory, international law obligates rescue at sea. In practice, rescue is political and increasingly delayed. European coastal authorities have reduced their patrols, relying on outsourced interception by the Libyan Coast Guard. NGOs operating rescue ships like Sea-Watch, Open Arms, or Médecins Sans Frontières are often blocked, delayed, or criminalized for aiding migrants. Khaled, from Sierra Leone, was on a boat for 19 hours before they were spotted by an NGO vessel. We had been waving plastic bottles. A woman jumped into the water to make them see us. That's when they turned. Others aren't so lucky. Sometimes the boats capsize before help comes. Sometimes help is only a voice on the radio saying, "We're looking for you," until the line goes dead. And sometimes, no one comes at all. 4. When the sea turns. Even calm waters are deceptive. The Mediterranean is shallow in parts, unpredictable in weather. A sudden gust can tilt an overcrowded boat. One panic can tip everyone. Mohammed, a teacher from Mali, described the moment the sea turned against them. It was like a switch. The water was still, then a wave hit. We all leaned left. The boat flipped like paper. I saw babies in the air. He clung to the deflated rubber edge for hours. Around him, silence grew as the cries disappeared. He saw bodies float. Then sink. I stopped screaming. It didn't matter anymore. When rescue ships finally arrived, only 29 were alive. More than 100 had boarded. Only the sea knew their names. 5. Floating with the dead. Survivors often speak of what comes next in fragments. Of holding hands with someone until their grip loosened. Of singing hymns or verses aloud to keep sane. Of mothers tying their babies to themselves with scarves so we go together. Adama, from Guinea, described clinging to a fuel container, watching the sun rise over still water. Around her were faces, some sleeping, some silent, some gone. I spoke to a girl for hours. She told me her name was Muna. She said she liked music. When a helicopter came, I turned to wake her, but she was gone. Rescue doesn't always mean relief. It often means trauma, shock, and the slow reckoning with who didn't make it. A man from Côte d'Ivoire wept during processing in Sicily not because he was safe, but because he couldn't remember his brother's last words. He told me something. I was too tired to listen. 6. The weight of numbers. When the media reports these tragedies, they speak in numbers. 76 feared dead off Lampedusa. 110 rescued by NGO ship. 45 drowned in failed crossing. But behind each number is a face, a playlist, a prayer, a nickname. A mother who sewed money into her son's jacket. A girl who dreamed of being a nurse. A boy who thought Europe meant football and free school. Their names rarely appear. Their stories are often told only if they survive. Yet the numbers add up. Since 2014, over 30,000 people have died or gone missing in the Mediterranean. And those are only the ones we know about. The sea keeps its own records. It does not need headlines. 7. Survivors on land, ghosts at sea. When survivors arrive, shivering, sunburnt, stunned, they are processed, photographed, and fingerprinted. Some are sent to detention. Others to temporary shelters. A few are allowed to apply for asylum. But all carry invisible cargo. They've survived the desert. Survived Libya. Survived the sea. But what comes next is not necessarily peace. It is often interrogation, suspicion, paperwork, limbo, and grief. Fode, 23, arrived in Lampedusa after watching his cousin drown. "I should have died with him," he said. "Now I carry both our stories." Every rescued migrant carries names that won't appear on forms. They mourn people their families may never know are gone. Some families keep calling. Some never stop waiting. Some hold funerals without bodies. The Mediterranean swallows not just people, but closure. Conclusion: morning never came. They were told they'd arrive by morning. That the journey would be fast. That the sea was gentle. That Europe was waiting. But the sea has no schedule. No empathy. No politics. It only takes what is given to it. And yet, they keep coming. Not because they are reckless. But because staying is slower death. Because drowning is not always the worst option. Because, in the darkness, even a lie that says you'll make it by morning sounds like hope. This chapter does not end in arrival. It ends in water. Because for too many, that's where the story stops. And for the rest of us, that's where the listening must begin. Chapter 6. Europe's eyes are closed. We saw the ship. We waved. We screamed. It turned away. Suleiman, 22, from Nigeria. 1. Rescue denied. The law of the sea is clear. Any vessel, public or private, encountering people in distress is obligated to rescue them. But in the Mediterranean, that law is now weighed against politics, borders, and bureaucratic delay. For many migrants, rescue doesn't come not because they weren't seen, but because they were. Several NGO ships operating in international waters have described a new pattern. Distress calls are passed from Italian or Maltese authorities to the Libyan Coast Guard. Even when the coordinates place boats much closer to European territory, help is often deferred or denied entirely. It is no longer about saving lives. It is about keeping them away. The sea has not grown crueler. Europe has simply chosen not to see. 2. The fortress grows. For years, Europe promised compassion, human rights, open arms. But in practice, it has been building a fortress, brick by brick, patrol by patrol. Frontex, the European Border and Coast Guard Agency, now spends over €750 million annually. Its mission was once surveillance and rescue. Today, it is enforcement and deterrence. Patrol vessels skim just along the line of international obligation. Planes fly overhead, marking migrant boats with coordinates, then alerting Libya to bring them back. Back to the cages. Back to the torture. In 2020 alone, more than 15,000 people were intercepted at sea and returned to Libya. The EU funds it. Frontex maps it. But no one takes responsibility. A policy expert at an Italian think tank put it plainly: the goal is not to stop people from drowning. It's to make sure they don't drown here. 3. Criminalizing compassion. In a bitter twist, those who try to help are treated as criminals. NGOs that operate rescue missions like Sea-Watch, SOS Mediterranean, and Open Arms face legal threats, port closures, and smear campaigns. Their ships are detained. Their crews are interrogated. Captains are charged with facilitating illegal migration simply for pulling drowning people from the sea. In 2019, Carola Rackete, a German captain, was arrested in Italy for docking a rescue ship with 40 migrants. Her crime? Not letting them die. These are not smugglers, said a former CI medic. These are volunteers risking arrest to save strangers. Even civilian fishermen in Sicily have been warned not to intervene if they see migrant boats. It's safer, they're told. Safer for whom? Europe has turned its gaze away not just from suffering, but from those who dare to relieve it. 4. Ports without welcome. Even when rescue happens, the battle is not over. Disembarkation becomes a new stage of conflict. NGO ships must often wait days or weeks at sea, with dehydrated survivors on board, while European nations argue over who will accept them. Italy points to Malta. Malta points to Spain. Spain says not our jurisdiction. Meanwhile, people vomit from heatstroke, women miscarry, and children cry without food. In 2021, a rescue vessel with 180 people waited 12 days before being allowed to dock. 4 people attempted suicide during that wait. This isn't immigration control, said one humanitarian doctor. This is psychological torture. Ports exist. Infrastructure exists. But political will is absent. 5. The politics of fear. In many European countries, migration has become a weapon in domestic politics. Right-wing parties stoke fear with images of invasion, even though the actual numbers have declined. In Italy, posters warn of Africans replacing us. In Hungary, fences rise higher. In France, Migrants are portrayed as criminals, not survivors. This fear becomes policy: border externalization, deportation deals, visa restrictions, detention quotas. The result? Fewer arrivals, but more deaths. Less migration, but more suffering. As one analyst from Human Rights Watch wrote, Europe isn't solving the crisis. It's hiding it offshore. 6. Selective sympathy. The contrast is impossible to ignore. When Ukrainian refugees fled war in 2022, they were welcomed with open arms. Train tickets were free. Borders opened overnight. Families took strangers into their homes. But when African refugees flee conflict, dictatorship, or the slow violence of poverty, they are met with suspicion and walls. Is our skin the difference? Asked Ibrahim, a 25-year-old from Burkina Faso. Do they only see humanity when it is white? The question lingers. Not as accusation, but as lived reality. 7. After arrival, still not safe. For those who do make it, past the sea, past the politics, past the processing, Europe is not always sanctuary. It is often shadow. Migrants are placed in camps, or low-income housing. They wait months, even years, for asylum decisions. Many are denied. Those with papers struggle to find work. Those without live invisibly, cleaning kitchens, harvesting fruit, or selling trinkets for survival. In Calais, France, dozens sleep in tents under overpasses, waiting for a chance to reach the UK. In Italy, migrants pick tomatoes for €3 an hour, under threat of deportation. Europe isn't what we thought, said Lamine from Senegal. It is better than Libya. But it is not free. Conclusion: who watches the watchers? Europe was once seen as a moral compass, committed to human rights, defenders of dignity. But in the Mediterranean, that compass spins without direction. Instead of confronting the causes of migration, poverty, conflict, colonial legacy, it confronts the boats. It closes the ports. It funds the return to places it would never send its own citizens. And yet, the people still come. Because for many, the chance to be seen, even just once, outweighs the certainty of being forgotten. Europe may close its eyes. But the sea remembers. And so must we. Part 4. Arrival isn't freedom. Crossing the Mediterranean is supposed to be the end of the nightmare. For many, it is seen as a finish line, a final test of faith and endurance. But for those who survive the sea, what awaits is not freedom. It is a different kind of waiting. On the shores of Lampedusa, in the camps of Sicily, in the shadows of Paris and Calais, migrants begin a new chapter defined not by danger, but by limbo. Papers are delayed. Rights are suspended. Identities are reduced to case numbers and interview transcripts. And yet, from thousands of miles away, families expect success. This part of the journey is quiet, but cruel. It demands performance: smile for the photos, send home remittances, hide the homelessness, the racism, the isolation. You made it, now you must prove it was worth it. In this section, we follow those who arrived but were never really welcomed. Those who escaped death, only to encounter a subtler kind of suffocation. Because getting to Europe is not the end of the journey. For many, it's just the beginning of another cage. Chapter 7. Refuge, or a new cage. They were told that the hardest part was behind them. They had crossed deserts that burned the skin off their backs. They had survived cages in Libya, where screams echoed louder than prayers. They had boarded boats on ink-black seas, chasing a sunrise they weren't sure would come. And then, finally, Italy, Malta, Spain, Europe. For a moment, they let themselves believe it was over. That the word refugee might mean safety. That the word arrival meant welcome. But Europe does not always greet with open arms. Sometimes, it greets with cages that are cleaner, quieter, more bureaucratic, but no less confining. 1. The camp by the sea. In Lampedusa, just beyond the view of tourists and fishing boats, stands a temporary reception center. It's surrounded by wire, guarded by men with tired eyes, and filled with silence that screams. Inside, the air smells of salt, sweat, and paperwork. Men sit on foam mats, knees to their chests. Some whisper in Pula, others hum songs in Yoruba or Mandinka. Many just stare. The rules are simple: wait. Don't ask questions. Follow instructions. Mariam, a 19-year-old from Guinea, clutches a number printed on a slip of paper. They call it my identity, she says. But it doesn't feel like mine. Some wait days. Others wait weeks. They are fingerprinted, interrogated, photographed. Some are placed in longer-term detention centers. Some are released into the streets with a notice to appear. Some simply disappear. Europe looks different from inside a fence, says Abdal, who once imagined Paris as a place of light. Here, it just feels like a pause I didn't ask for. 2. The geography of waiting. What many migrants discover after arriving is that freedom is not a location, it's a permission. Across Italy, Greece, and France, thousands of African migrants are stuck in administrative limbo. They apply for asylum and are told to wait. They wait for interviews. Then for decisions. Then for appeals. The process can take months. Sometimes years. During that time, they cannot work legally. They cannot move freely. They cannot make plans. They are, in effect, legal ghosts, present, but invisible. In a camp outside Catania, Sicily, Lamin from the Gambia has waited 18 months for his asylum application to be processed. I used to count the days, he says. Now I just try to forget what day it is. For every document processed, 10 more pile up. For every approval, dozens face rejection. And for the rejected, there is no easy return, only shame, detention, or deeper hiding. 3. The myth of arrival. Europe, for many back home, still shines like a myth. Photos of snow-covered streets, Eiffel Towers, and glowing Christmas markets circulate on Facebook and WhatsApp. Families imagine their sons and daughters sipping lattes, attending language classes, working in shops or hospitals. But behind many of those photos is a shared truth: performance. In Calais, dozens of African migrants sleep in tents beneath highway overpasses, trying to reach the UK. They charge their phones at gas stations, eat donated bread, and send cheerful messages back home. You have to lie, says Boubacar, a 24-year-old from Mali. If you tell your mother the truth, that you sleep outside and haven't bathed in days, she will die before you do. This pressure to appear successful is immense. It fuels silence. It kills confessions. And it keeps the illusion alive that Europe is still worth it. 4. The detention that follows. For those unlucky enough to be intercepted or profiled, arrival quickly morphs into detention. In Malta, migrants are often kept in converted military barracks. In Greece, they are fenced in near the coast, unable to leave. In Italy, they're held in centers with names like Centro di Permanenza per Illinois Rimpatrio, centers for return. Return to where? Many cannot answer. Some have no documents. Others have no functioning governments. Some are stateless by circumstance, if not by law. They are locked up not for a crime, but for being difficult to deport. I spent 6 months in a room with 50 men, says Amadou from Senegal. No charges. No trial. Just waiting. Inside these centers, mental health deteriorates quickly. Suicide attempts are not uncommon. Neither are hunger strikes. Europe does not call them prisons. But the bars look the same. 5. Work without rights. Those who escape detention often fall into another trap: the underworld of undocumented labor. In southern Italy, migrants pick tomatoes under a blazing sun for €3 an hour. In Spain, they harvest strawberries for industrial farms. In France, they clean hotel bathrooms or work construction, paid in cash, always under threat. The work is hard. The hours are long. The pay is meager. But many prefer this to going back. I didn't cross the sea to beg, says Ibrahim from Nigeria, now working illegally in a Sicilian vineyard. Even if the job is hell, I must make it heaven. Without legal status, they are vulnerable to exploitation. Employers withhold wages. Landlords charge triple rent. Police raids become nightmares. Still, some send money home. Still, some smile in photos. Still, some whisper, "I'm fine." Because anything is better than being seen as a failure. 6. The racism they meet. European cities are not free of hostility. Migrants speak of being followed in stores, insulted on buses, stopped by police. Black skin becomes a flag, an identifier that never lowers. In a Paris suburb, a Senegalese man named Cheek recounts how a woman clutched her purse when he sat beside her on the train. I smiled. She moved seats. In Athens, Mamadou was beaten by a group of men with shaved heads. The police told him to go back to where you came from. Even in progressive cities, the stares sting. The assumptions hurt. They fled violence, but not hate. 7. Papers that don't protect. Even legal status is not always a shield. Asylum seekers who receive temporary protection are often handed documents that expire quickly. A single missed appointment or relocation can void everything. Mohammed, from Sierra Leone, had his residency card stolen. By the time he reported it and reapplied, the office had moved. His file was lost. He became undocumented again. Legal limbo becomes a loop. Start over. Wait again. Explain yourself to a new caseworker. Tell the story one more time. The trauma of the journey is replayed not only in memory but in interviews, forms, and disbelief. 8. A new kind of loneliness. Isolation is the quietest pain. Many migrants say they feel invisible in cities packed with people. They pass cafes filled with laughter. They hear music but cannot dance. They speak, but are not heard. Fatoumata, 23, from Guinea, spends her days in a shelter in Palermo. I don't belong anywhere, she says. Not here. Not home. I'm between places. Some find community in mosques or churches. Some in WhatsApp groups. But many withdraw. Depression grows in silence. Hope wilts under bureaucracy. A few give up and return home. Most don't. They have come too far. Lost too much. 9. Sending smiles, hiding tears. Back home, the myth must live on. Migrants become actors in a long-running play, performing happiness for the audience that waits. They send money, photos, emojis. They avoid the truth. I can't tell my father I sleep in a park, says Siku from Guinea. He would ask, why did you leave then? I don't have an answer. This burden of projected success leads some to take desperate steps, loans to send remittances, theft to buy clothes for selfies, silence to cover suicide attempts. Migration does not end at arrival. It just moves underground. 10. The cage with a view. Europe is not a singular villain in this story. Many NGOs, citizens, and organizations fight daily to support migrants with food, shelter, legal aid. Some Italians offer rides. Some French families open their homes. But goodwill cannot undo policy. The system is not broken. It is working as designed, to delay, discourage, and defer. The result is a freedom shaped like a cage. It has windows, even gardens. But no door. And so, migrants remain stuck between survival and dignity. Between the dream they chased and the reality they endure. Freedom, says Fanta, should feel like breathing. But here, I'm still holding my breath. Conclusion, the price of almost. To survive the sea is a triumph. But to live after surviving it, truly live, requires more than a visa. It requires space. Safety. Dignity. Europe has offered escape. But not always arrival. Not the kind that means home. Not the kind that means belonging. The journey didn't end at the shoreline. It just changed costume. The cage got quieter. The bars got cleaner. But they are still bars. And still they stay. Still they hope. Still they wait. Because even a fractured future feels better than a broken past. Chapter 8. Sending smiles, hiding tears. At home, they are heroes. Abroad, they are ghosts. Every day, across towns and villages in West Africa, someone receives a WhatsApp message from Europe. A voice note. A short video. A photo of a smiling young man in a thick jacket, or a woman holding a takeaway coffee in a snowy street. The background looks clean. Safe. Different. To families back home, these images mean everything. They are proof that the journey was worth it. That the pain, the prayers, the borrowed money, the quiet goodbyes, all of it led somewhere better. But often, they are lies. Curated performances. Carefully framed illusions. Behind those smiles are tears. Behind the filters is hunger. Behind the promise is pressure. This is the unseen chapter of migration, not the journey itself, but the act of constantly proving that the journey was worth it. Not just surviving in Europe, but pretending to thrive. 1. The currency of illusion. From Dakar to Conakry, from Kano to Bissau, there is a phrase that circulates like scripture: just get to Europe. No one talks about what comes after. Because what comes after does not fit the narrative of escape and success. Yet, for many migrants, performing that success becomes a second job, one just as exhausting as construction work, factory shifts, or street vending. Amadou, a 26-year-old from Senegal, sleeps on a mattress under a bridge in Marseille. He picks fruit during the day and showers at a church when he can. But once a week, he walks to a nearby mall with free Wi-Fi and clean toilets. There, he records videos for his family. He smiles. He poses. He speaks in French. Bonjour, maman. Je suis très bien. He shows them a shiny building and says it's where he works. It's not. I have to, he says. They sold their goat to help me leave. What do I tell them? That I sleep with rats. 2. Performing paradise. Social media has transformed migration. No longer is the migrant's success measured by quiet letters or stories told at weddings. Now, it's measured by likes, emojis, and status updates. Young migrants in Paris post selfies beside the Eiffel Tower, often taken on a single visit, then recycled for months. Others take photos in clothing stores, pretending to shop, then return the clothes to the rack. Fatou, 23, from Guinea, works long hours cleaning offices at night in Milan. She shares photos of herself sipping cappuccino in daytime cafes, pictures taken during her single day off, staged to maintain the image. People back home think I live like Beyoncé, she laughs bitterly. But I haven't bought a new jacket in 2 winters. The pressure to perform success leads to exhaustion. Some migrants work 7 days a week to afford remittances. Others skip meals so they can send money back. Some borrow just to impress. The illusion is not just emotional, it is economic. 3. The economics of shame. Remittances are a lifeline. In countries like Senegal, the Gambia, and Nigeria, diaspora money funds everything from school fees to house construction to hospital bills. Migrants become breadwinners not only for their immediate families, but for entire communities. This creates a powerful burden. One that shames those who cannot provide. Those who struggle. Those who barely survive. Khadija, a 27-year-old from Sierra Leone living in Palermo, sends €100 home every month. She works illegally cleaning houses. If she skips a payment, her aunt calls. Then her cousin. They think I'm selfish, she says. They say, you've forgotten us. But I eat once a day. Some migrants fall into debt just to maintain the illusion. They take high-interest loans. They borrow from other migrants. They sell phones, jackets, even blood. Not because they are careless, but because they are cornered by expectation. Failure, in migration, is not just personal. It is public. 4. The call that changes everything. There is a village in central Gambia where 3 young men built a house for their mother with money sent from Europe. The roof is zinc. The walls are painted blue. At night, neighbors come to charge their phones with the house's solar panel. None of the brothers are legally employed. One works at an orange farm in southern Italy. The other 2 alternate between delivery jobs and undocumented construction work. They live in a shared room with mold on the walls. Their mother has never seen this. All she knows is that her sons are doing well. One day, the youngest brother, Tijan, missed a transfer. His phone battery died. By the time he called back, his mother was crying. She thought something had happened to me, he says. But really, I was just tired. Too tired to pretend. Pretending is not just a performance. It is a ritual. Breaking it feels like betrayal. 5. The silence of the suffering. The emotional cost of migration is often buried beneath remittance receipts and happy photos. Mental health, in this context, is a luxury many cannot afford or speak of. Many migrants struggle with depression, anxiety, and PTSD from the journey, from the sea, from the violence endured in Libya. But few seek help. Many don't know how. In Rome, a small group of West African men gather every Sunday to play football in a dusty park. It is their only therapy. No one talks about what happened, says Chinedu, a Nigerian in the group. But when we play, it feels like we're alive again. Others isolate. They stop calling home. Not out of apathy, but shame. Some delete WhatsApp. Some fake new identities. Some simply vanish. Not because they no longer care, but because they can no longer bear the pressure to perform joy they do not feel. Six. The phone with two faces. A mobile phone is a lifeline and a trap. It brings news from home. Photos of newborn nieces. Voice notes from uncles asking for small assistance. It reminds migrants who they left behind, and who they are expected to become. But it also creates a split identity. Dialing into home means entering a version of themselves they can no longer recognize. A version that must always say, yes, I am fine. Yes, I am eating. Yes, the job is good. In the refugee shelters of southern France, phones glow in the dark like fireflies. Migrants record short videos against clean walls to hide their surroundings. They speak softly, hiding the fatigue in their voices. Sometimes the only place they can be honest is in shared rooms with other migrants, strangers who understand the silence between words. 7. Love in exile. Relationships suffer, too. Some migrants leave behind lovers, fiancés, even spouses. Promises are made, I'll come back, I'll send for you, just wait. But distance bends truth. Time distorts it. New countries bring new temptations and new wounds. Isatu, 30, left the Gambia 5 years ago. Her boyfriend was supposed to follow. He never did. She now lives with a man in Naples, but her family still thinks she's single. If they find out, she says, they'll say I've changed. That I've become European. Love, like success, must be curated. Acceptable. Pure. Some migrants marry to secure papers. Others hide relationships to avoid scandal. Even joy becomes complicated when it must be hidden from those who funded your escape. 8. Between guilt and gratitude. Every migrant carries 2 suitcases, one with clothes, the other with emotion. In the second are packed gratitude and guilt, folded tight, inseparable. They are grateful to have survived. Grateful to have reached Europe, while others drowned or disappeared. But they are also guilty for not sending more money. For not calling enough. For not becoming the success their families imagined. Adebayo, from Nigeria, broke down during an interview in Bologna. My mother sold land for me to travel. Now I clean toilets. And I can't even tell her. He sends photos of a cleaner apartment. Of a co-worker's car. Of a smile he forces. Migration demands not just the body, but the constant labor of gratitude. To prove you are thankful. To prove you are not wasting the sacrifice. Even when it is breaking you. 9. The lie that protects. Why do migrants keep pretending? Because the lie protects everyone. It protects the family's hope. It protects the migrant's pride. It protects the myth that migration leads somewhere brighter. Truth, in this context, feels cruel. Saying I am not okay might undo years of dreams. It might shatter the only thing holding the family together, belief. So they send smiles. They hide tears. They laugh in voice notes. They say, don't worry, everything is fine. Even when it isn't. Conclusion, behind every smile. Migration is more than movement. It is a mask. Behind every cheerful selfie is a story unsaid. Behind every wire transfer is a week of hunger. Behind every silence is a soul trying not to break. The world sees boats, numbers, faces at fences. But the truest part of migration may be what is never spoken, what is hidden between emojis, between filtered images, between careful lies. If we want to understand the full cost of this journey, we must look beyond the sea. We must listen not only to those who scream, but to those who smile quietly. Because those smiles might be the loudest cries of all. Part 5. The Aftermath and the Alternative. What happens after the journey doesn't always make headlines. The boats fade from view. The bodies are buried or never found. The names disappear. But the impact ripples across continents. In one village, a mother waits for a call that never comes. In another, a child grows up watching strangers build houses with money sent from abroad. Elsewhere, young people gather in borrowed classrooms, determined to build futures at home even as others continue to leave. This part of the story is not just about grief. It is also about resistance. About memory. About imagination. Because for every life lost at sea, there are voices refusing to let them be forgotten. And for every youth who leaves, there are others choosing to stay and fight for change. Here, we explore both the heartbreak and the hope. The families left behind. The funerals without bodies. The youth-led revolutions trying to rebuild what the journey has taken away. If there is a future, it begins here, between mourning and movement, between loss and the audacity to dream again. Chapter 9. Those Who Never Made It. In a village in northern Guinea, a mother sets 3 plates on the table, though only 2 people remain in the house. Her eldest son left for Europe 2 years ago. He promised to call when he reached Libya. Then, silence. His name was Ibrahima. She still says it in her prayers. No official ever confirmed his death. No body was returned. No grave was dug. But in her heart, she knows. The call that didn't come was the message itself. And yet, she cannot mourn fully. Not without proof. So she floats between hope and heartbreak. Between maybe and never again. This is how many stories end, not with headlines, but with absence. 1. Disappeared without a trace. There are no accurate numbers for how many African migrants have died en route to Europe. The sea keeps few records. The desert keeps even fewer. Some die in the Sahara, buried under sand by strangers, if at all. Some are abandoned in Libya, killed in detention or sold and never heard from again. Others drown in the Mediterranean, their bodies lost to waves or washing ashore unnamed. For every migrant who arrives in Europe, there are dozens who vanish along the way, unclaimed, undocumented, unremembered. Marioma, a social worker in Agadez, keeps a folder of handwritten notes from families searching for lost sons and daughters. Some were last seen at checkpoints, she says. Some boarded boats that never arrived. Others were detained and never released. The folder grows heavier every month. 2. Funerals without bodies. In a small village in Casamance, Senegal, elders gather to pray for Fallou, a young man who left for Europe 6 months ago. He was last seen in Libya. No one has heard from him since. His family decided to hold a symbolic funeral. An imam leads prayers. A goat is slaughtered. Neighbors bring rice and kola nuts. They call it a burial of the soul. Fallou's younger sister places his old school bag on a mat. So he's not forgotten, she whispers. These funerals without bodies are becoming common across West Africa. Communities grieve those who may never return, without certainty, without closure. There is no death certificate. No coffin. Only emptiness. 3. Mothers who still wait. They wait in silence. On verandas. In market stalls. By phones that never ring. Azaitatu, a mother of 4 in the Gambia, keeps her son's photo framed beside a jar of sand he brought back from his trip to Agadez. He said it was the beginning of the end. He promised he'd build me a new house, she says, tracing his smile in the photo. Now I just pray for a sign. Some mothers become activists, founding support groups for the families of the missing. Others retreat into silence, ashamed to admit they encouraged the journey. In Ghana, a woman named Abina hosts monthly prayer meetings for mothers whose children disappeared abroad. We cry together, she says. So we don't go mad alone. Loss without a body is a grief that never settles. 4. Siblings who carry the silence. The pain of disappearance doesn't stop at the parents. It runs down the line, siblings who grow up in shadows, carrying the burden of a dream they didn't chase but now must honor. Musa, 17, in Mali, speaks rarely of his older brother, Cheek, who vanished crossing from Libya to Italy. My mother still says he's in Europe, he says. I know he's not. I saw the photo. The sea gave him back. But the village won't accept it. Not without a grave. So Musa shoulders 2 lives, his own, and the one Cheek never got to live. He studies engineering. Sends money when he can. And avoids the ocean. I won't leave, he says. I've seen what leaving can cost. 5. The digital ghosts. On Facebook, there are accounts that still post from the dead. Automated birthday reminders. Photos that surface in memory reels. Friends who write, "We miss you, bro," under old profile pictures. In one group called Europe Bound, members began sharing lists of people who haven't checked in for weeks. They tag names. Post coordinates. Plead for news. But mostly, they're met with silence. Or worse, news of drownings. A blurry video. A photo of bodies in life jackets. The digital footprints remain. But the people are gone. A boy from Benin. A girl from Guinea. A man who once wrote, "Pray for me. If I make it, I will build a school in my village." Now, only his last post remains. 6. The weight on communities. In some towns, so many have left and never returned that grief becomes part of the landscape. Empty chairs at weddings. Faces missing from family photos. Elders who speak of grandchildren they've never seen. In Ziguinchor, Senegal, one imam began including and those lost at sea in his Friday prayers. Their families need to hear it, he says. So they know we haven't forgotten. But remembrance is hard when governments deny the crisis, when media lose interest, when survivors are afraid to speak. So communities remember in fragments, stories, songs, meals cooked in silence. And names that are no longer spoken aloud, for fear they are already gone. 7. The survivors who carry their names. Not everyone who makes it forgets. Some survivors carry with them the stories of those who didn't. They remember the girl who gave her last bottle of water. The man who recited Quranic verses as the engine failed. The boy who couldn't swim but smiled anyway. In Sicily, a small group of young men from Côte d'Ivoire and Nigeria gather once a month to light candles for those lost at sea. They read names when they have them. Nicknames when they don't. One survivor, Suleiman, says, "I speak their names so the sea doesn't win." Another keeps a notebook filled with stories, small details, favorite songs, last jokes, hometowns. They weren't just numbers, he says. They were us. 8. Governments that look away. Very few African governments maintain reliable lists of missing migrants. Fewer still launch serious investigations. Most remain silent, treating the dead and disappeared as outliers, tragic but inevitable. Migration is framed as a personal choice, says a West African migration researcher. When something goes wrong, governments absolve themselves. And Europe is complicit. By outsourcing migration control to countries like Libya and Niger, EU states distance themselves from accountability. Those who die in transit become collateral, an unacknowledged cost of border policy. The result: no justice. No accountability. No closure. Only families with questions, and borders with no answers. 9. The unwritten obituaries. No newspaper will publish their names. No head of state will speak of their deaths. No memorial will rise over the sand where they disappeared. But they mattered. Each one had a reason for leaving. A person they loved. A talent. A playlist. A dream that refused to die quietly. They were not statistics. They were stories interrupted. And those stories deserve to be finished, even if only in remembrance. Conclusion: not just gone, taken. Those who never made it did not simply disappear. They were taken by systems that failed them, by governments that ignored them, by waters that swallowed them silently. But the silence must not last. We must speak their names. Build digital altars. Hold community prayers. Document the undocumented. Honor the unfinished lives. Because memory is resistance. And in remembering the dead, we speak truth to the living. This should not be normal. This should not be necessary. This should never be forgotten. Chapter 10. Those who stayed to rebuild. Not everyone left. In a world where motion is often seen as salvation, staying can seem like surrender. But across West Africa, there are young people who chose to remain not because they had more, but because they believed they could make more. They watched their friends disappear into the desert. They saw WhatsApp groups filled with updates from Europe, some triumphant, many tragic. And still, they stayed. They are not heroes. They are not martyrs. They are simply builders, laying bricks of change in places the world too often overlooks. This is their story. The story of those who chose to fight for the future at home, rather than flee from the failure around them. 1. The code that stayed in Gambia. In a small house in Serekunda, the Gambia, 6 young men gather around old laptops. They've patched together solar panels, salvage chargers, and second-hand Reuters. This is not a cybercafe, it's a coding club. Started by Awa, 24, who studied ICT through an online course, the club teaches local teenagers how to build websites and mobile apps. The first app they launched was a simple weather service in Wolof for farmers. The second helps students find tutors nearby. Awa had a chance to leave. A cousin in Italy offered to fund her passage. But she declined. Everyone said I was crazy, she laughs. But I didn't want to survive in Europe. I wanted to matter here. Now, her club has trained over 40 students. Some earn freelance income building websites for NGOs and local businesses. Others have started tutoring younger kids. Maybe we're not rich, Awa says. But we're useful. 2. The soil that grows futures. In northern Nigeria, amid the scorched terrain outside Kano, a group of young women is transforming abandoned land into productive farmland. They call themselves the Backyard Growers. Led by Zainab, 27, a former biology teacher, the collective cultivates tomatoes, onions, and moringa. They use low-cost drip irrigation made from recycled bottles and run farming tutorials on Instagram. Zainab once considered migrating. She even attended a smuggler's briefing in Sokoto. But the stories frightened her. A friend died in Libya, she says. That was my sign. Instead, she took a small microloan, started a garden, and trained 6 other women. Now they're supplying produce to local markets and teaching teenage girls the business side of agriculture. Farming is not old-fashioned, Zainab says. It's survival. It's power. It's how we reclaim our worth. 3. The art that resists forgetting. In Kotona, Benin, a group of young artists has opened a small gallery. It's not glossy. The walls are chipped. The lights flicker. But the work inside burns with urgency. Portraits of missing migrants. Abstract sculptures made from life jackets. A mural titled The Desert Ate My Brother. The gallery was founded by Lionel, 29, a painter whose cousin died crossing to Spain. Instead of fleeing grief, he turned it into expression. We make art from absence, he says. To remind people that migration has a cost even when it succeeds. The group also hosts spoken word nights. Young poets recite verses about corruption, hope, longing, and home. Some cry mid-performance. The audience doesn't mind. For them, this is church. Migration is a story, says Lionel. We're just telling the part people try to forget. 4. The school that refused to close. In a dusty town near Banjul, a school once shuttered due to unpaid salaries has reopened not through government help, but through the will of its former students. Feitu, 25, once dreamed of studying in Europe. But when her younger sister's school closed, she couldn't watch her education end, too. She rallied former classmates, raised funds through diaspora WhatsApp groups, and rehired 2 teachers. Now, the school teaches 60 students, mostly girls. They sit on mismatched chairs. Their textbooks are torn. But they are learning. We couldn't fix the country, Feitu says. But we could fix this street. The school also runs a weekend program for girls vulnerable to early marriage. It's basic, chalk, borrowed space, second-hand uniforms, but transformative. Feitu now dreams of expanding. If others can cross oceans, we can cross neighborhoods. 5. The media that speaks truth. In Freetown, Sierra Leone, a youth-run radio station is redefining what it means to tell the truth. Radio U-Turn broadcasts stories from returnees, those who went to Libya, nearly drowned in the Mediterranean, and came back. But they also air interviews with those who chose never to go. One show, Stay and Build, profiles local entrepreneurs. Another, What They Don't Show You, debunks myths about Europe. Our mission is simple, says Abdul, the 22-year-old station manager. To give young people honest choices. The station hosts call-in sessions with students, farmers, and single mothers. Some share pain. Others share dreams. Once, a boy from a nearby village called in and said, "I was going to leave. Now I think I'll stay. I want to start a carpentry shop." The room went silent. That, Abdul says, is our reward. 6. The power of saying no. In villages across Africa, staying is still misunderstood. People ask, "What's wrong with him? Why is she still here? Is he afraid?" But for many youth, staying is not weakness. It is resistance. They are resisting the lie that opportunity lives only abroad. They are resisting the narrative that dignity requires departure. They are resisting the quiet acceptance of broken systems. Musa, 21, from Guinea, runs a motorcycle repair business with his brothers. "I fix things," he says. "I don't want to run away from every broken thing." His friends tease him. Some say he's wasting time. But he makes enough to eat. To help his parents. To save for the future. And that, he believes, is revolutionary enough. 7. The risk of staying. To stay is not easy. Corruption still strangles initiative. Power outages darken schools. Governments break promises with bureaucratic smiles. Many who stay live with constant temptation. Another cousin made it, another neighbor sends money, another recruiter arrives promising shortcuts. But those who stay are not naive. They are strategic. They form cooperatives, lobby local leaders, apply for grants, build networks across borders, not just to survive, but to thrive. They are planting roots in scorched soil, betting that something can still grow. Not everyone believes in them, but they believe in each other. And that is how movements begin. 8. A different kind of journey. For too long, migration has been framed as a one-way journey. Here is despair, there is hope. But the youth who stay are offering an alternative map, one that moves inward, not outward. That charts paths through community, not just geography. Some will still leave. That's their right. But others will stay, and shape what remains. They will build schools, plant fields, host workshops, paint murals, code apps, share knowledge, spark change. And maybe one day, the world will stop asking, "Why didn't you leave?" and start asking, "How did you stay?" Conclusion: staying is not stillness. Staying is not silence. Staying is not surrender. Staying is not stuck. It is a decision, a difficult, radical, deeply courageous one, to face the fire rather than flee the smoke. To stay in places the world has given up on. To fight for futures that don't yet exist. To reclaim hope, inch by inch. The young Africans who stayed are not waiting for the world to save them. They are saving themselves. Their names won't make headlines. Their stories may not go viral. But in classrooms, on farms, in workshops and radio stations, they are rewriting the narrative. Because staying is not less brave. Sometimes it's the bravest thing of all. Final chapter: What the world must learn. The journey ends here, not at a border, not in a grave, not in a camp, but in a question. What kind of world forces its youth to trade dreams for danger, passports for prayers, and potential for peril? And why do so many of us watch from a distance, silent, comfortable, and complicit? The deadliest journey across the Mediterranean is not just a regional crisis. It is a moral mirror. One that reflects the world's deepest contradictions: progress built on abandonment, wealth next to want, freedom for some, and fences for others. This story has crossed oceans. But the truths it reveals live everywhere. So what must the world learn? 1. Migration is logic, not madness. We often ask, why would someone risk everything to cross the sea in a rubber boat? The better question is, why must they? Migration is not a lapse in judgment. It is a rational response to structural despair. When staying means starvation, repression, or the quiet humiliation of wasted youth, then leaving even at the risk of death becomes the clearest logic. Europe sees desperation. But in reality, it is witnessing intelligent defiance. Young people are not fleeing because they hate home. They are fleeing because home stopped making sense. 2. The crisis didn't start at the border. The Mediterranean crisis does not begin in Zawara or Agadez. It begins in overcrowded classrooms with no teachers. In hospitals without power. In government offices where bribes are standard procedure. In town halls where youth voices are silenced. In broken economies and borrowed futures. By the time a young person reaches the sea, the system has already failed them many times over. What the world must learn is that the boat is not the start of the journey, it is the consequence. And until we fix what forces people into boats, we will keep pulling bodies from the water. 3. Aid is not justice. Billions are spent on development aid. There are glossy brochures. Smiling children. Metrics. Conferences. But how can we speak of development while funding governments that brutalize their own? How can we talk about partnership when the imbalance of power remains so glaring? What migrants want is not handouts, it is dignity. They want a chance to grow something at home. To fail and try again. To believe that staying is not the same as giving up. The world must move from charity to accountability, from helping Africa to asking who made Africa poor, and who continues to profit from its pain. 4. Borders are not neutral. Fences don't just block bodies. They also send messages. They say, you are not wanted. Your pain is not ours. Your life has no value here. Pushbacks at sea. Delayed rescues. Detention camps that rebrand suffering. These are not border enforcement policies. They are choices that prioritize control over compassion. And they reveal what borders truly protect, not safety, but privilege. We must learn that borders, as they exist now, do not separate nations, they separate the seen from the unseen, the mourned from the ignored. 5. Silence is a position. Every time a boat capsizes and we scroll past it. Every time a mother buries a child without knowing why, and we say nothing. Every time a migrant is sold in Libya or shot at a checkpoint and the world looks away. We are making a choice. Neutrality is not innocence. Silence is a position, and often, it is the position of power. Of those who can afford to look away. What the world must learn is that empathy requires action. And complicity often wears the mask of apathy. 6. We must speak their names. The dead are not numbers. They are not statistics to be updated quarterly. They are people with stories, cut short, buried in silence. Fode. Aminata. Cheek. Bokar. Muna. Issa. Mariam. They were loved. They were gifted. They had playlists, dreams, arguments, bad jokes, and big plans. We must say their names. Tell their stories. Make space for their memory not just in sorrow, but in policy. In classrooms. In the way we vote, donate, organize, and live. Because remembrance is not sentimentality. It is resistance against erasure. 7. Change is already here. Despite the tragedy, there is hope not manufactured, but earned. Young people are organizing, coding, farming, creating, protesting, rebuilding. The future is not waiting for permission. It is being forged in the fire of survival. And the world must not just applaud these efforts. It must amplify them. Invest in them. Learn from them. Not as stories of pity, but as blueprints of power. The youth who stayed to rebuild are not exceptions. They are signals. That change is possible. That another way is already being imagined from the ground up. 8. Listening must become the default. For too long, policy has been written without listening. Stories have been told without the storyteller's voice. Migration has been defined by those who watch it, not those who live it. This book is not a conclusion. It is a call to listen better. Listen to the girl who crossed the desert and still dreams of becoming a nurse. To the boy who watched his cousin drown and still says, I'm lucky. To the mother who sold her gold bracelet to fund her son's journey, and still waits by the phone. Their voices are not background noise. They are truth. And the world must learn that no solution is valid unless it begins with them. Epilogue, a chance, not charity. What if we looked at migrants not as threats, but as testimonies? Not as problems to be solved, but as people pointing to the very systems that made them flee? They are telling us something. With their movement. With their silence. With their absence. They are saying, the future cannot wait. They are asking, will you see us before we disappear? And they are reminding us. This is not just a migration crisis. This is a dignity crisis. A justice crisis. A future in free fall. We must choose to learn. To act. To remember. Not tomorrow. Now. Because the boats are still leaving. The sand is still burying. The sea is still swallowing. And the world is still watching.